let me straight dive into some of the strategies that we've been using for water conservation. Definitely, these are technologies that have been around. It's not something that's new, and by virtue of the kind of work that we do, we have always tried to keep our technological intervention low tech and very economical. And why I say that before I go into some of these technologies that's there on the screen, you know, we believe that for people to participate in water interventions, the intervention itself or the technology itself needs to be so attractive that both economically and in terms of its management and use, that people will automatically come forth and look at participating in these interventions and subsequently owning them, right? Otherwise, it always remains like an external actor came, they provided something, and they had some funds or some grants, and they've come, done their work, and they have exited. So there's really no attachment to what has happened there, and that's where we suffer, because then communities fall back on whatever they think is better. So, I mean, just to give you an analogy, today, with the amount of penetration that we have with mobile phones, if we roll back and see, it's become so cheap with the entry of so many players in the market. And this is one dimension of the issue. The other dimension of management and use is separate, and I'll talk about that later. Just the cost part of it, if some of these technologies that we've been working on water can be scaled down to a point where we equate it to a cost of a mobile phone in some sense, then perhaps we will find a better uptake of some of these technologies. And this has been our constant endeavor to try and make these technologies as simplistic and as affordable so that communities can start to adopt it more widely. So on the same vein, if you see, we have attempted to look at uh, water conservation from the point of view of water availability, as in securing the source. Because we know that there is very limited attention on aquifers today. While there is a lot of rhetorical talk about conservation, there is no concerted effort to look at our aquifers and recharge our aquifers. So going back to some of our traditional technologies of rainwater harvesting, if you see on the bottom right is a dug well that is in an agricultural location. Places like Kerala, which had this culture of dug well, and other places in the south, now have run out of shallow aquifer waters, right? Dug wells are not in use anymore. Bore wells have taken over, but we still find, very surprisingly, in our intervention areas across India, that people fall back on these wells. And after every monsoon, the shallow aquifers get revived, and these are critical lifelines for people. All we need to do is ensure that that structure is safeguarded, and the community will look after it, and it will provide a critical lifeline for them during acute, months. On the top left, if you see, is a simple abandoned borewell recharge structure. This abandoned borewells are now so many in across the landscape in rural India that it's gone from anywhere between 400 to 600 and even beyond 1,000 feet. That you have these shafts that are lying, that are going right into our aquifers. So instead of extracting water, we were thinking we should probably reverse this process and put water back in. So that's the simple principle, reversing the flow of water back into our aquifers. So identifying micro catchments, channelizing water into the abandoned borewell, creating simple perforated shafts and structures which support and enable water to get into the abandoned borewell is all that we need to do. And then our aquifers will get automatically recharged. And within one hydrological year, our experience has been that quite a few borewells across many of our intervention areas have been revived, and that has become kind of a backup borewell for the community, or it has been a borewell for, say, a few farmers to undertake cultivation and so on. So it's really very simple, these strategies, and really very scalable as well. And the bottom right is a rainwater harvesting tank with overflow that is then recharged. So a dual combination of storage come recharge is something we have been implementing in many areas with quite a bit of success. In some places, the tank is also is a hybrid tank with a partition where one side is connected with municipal supply and the other side is the water from the roof is treated through the filter media that is lying on top, the structure you see on the top, and then it is collected into the other section of the rainwater, other section of the tank. So both sources are available, and it's a dual purpose hybrid kind of tank, and it gives them both options whenever, depending on the situation, what kind of water they want to use, right? So these are broadly our effort at water conservation. Going back to the basics essentially is what we are trying to do, right? And we have been able to intensify these recharge efforts. So if we start to look at shallow aquifers and deeper aquifers, we have a certain set of interventions that have worked and which communities can own and manage by themselves. I mean, be it rural or urban, it's quite appealing for these communities to take it on and run it by themselves. In urban, we have experiences in gated communities and other places where slowly there is a movement for people to start to adopt these structures, their recharge pits, and so on. A group called Smaran, who is part of our consortium, they've had some good experience doing such initiatives. So there are shallow aquifer strategies and deeper aquifer strategies. And the question that naturally comes to people's mind would be, how would you know where is our aquifers, right? We can go about recharging it, and in the urban context, one of the interesting conversations we repeatedly keep having is, yeah, of course, we are interested in rainwater harvesting. We will definitely do it, but how do we know it benefits us? It could potentially be benefiting a neighbor or somebody else in a couple of streets away, because the aquifer is lying somewhere else while we might be recharging here and we might be drawing water from some other aquifer, right? So how do we know where it lies? And after we had this sort of multiple rounds and multiple discussions on how we do it, we came across Aquadam, an organization which has been working in this space for a while. All of you might be familiar with them. They came up with this simple approach to map aquifers, and they call it the managed aquifer recharge approach. Essentially, identifying where our aquifers could potentially be and targeting our recharge efforts accordingly. It is a simple methodology. It is aimed at connecting the communities with their aquifers. So communities themselves, to some extent, can be involved in the data collection. And once we have a sense of the depth of borewell data, depth of borewells and duct wells, Aquadam will help us to look at creating an aquifer map so that we can then put up our recharge efforts, as in the injection wells or the other kinds of recharge efforts, depending on the depth of the aquifer, the flow within the aquifer, and so on and so forth. And we've been now over the last few years, we've been adopting this approach wherever we undertake water recharge and water conservation efforts. I'm happy to talk about that later, as part of your questions, but in interest of time, I'll just move on. And some of these traditional structures you're seeing here, the pond, the check dam, and abandoned borewell. So all of these, just when we infuse the recharge component into some of these existing structures, we have achieved our purpose and we have replicated our work multifold in ensuring that the source is actually secure and the resources is conserved for future use. We've also adopted strategies where we work in institutions, like I was mentioning. Instead of just looking at provisioning of water and sanitation services, we've gone a step ahead and included water conservation in this. Because one of the things that we find is on the top left here, you will see that this is a large school, and it has such a large premise that there's so much of water that can be harvested from it. So with a combination of technologies like these trenches and some of the other deeper aquifer technologies, we ensure that no water actually leaves this premises and they actually get recharged. And perhaps an investment in this school would probably be around 1 lakh or so for this. With some amount of community mobilization, this cost can be actually easily collected, communities themselves can be working with the school administration. They will be able to happily do this in that particular cost. And extending that on the source side, we also thought of the wastewater side, doing a little bit on grey water management. and most of these schools also have facilities for this. Just revamping those facilities to ensure that the grey water is actually recycled and recharged. So this is a sort of work on approach on recharge that we've been doing. We have done some innovations also, but those are very few, so I'm not going into detail. But by and large, this is something that we've been able to do at scale, and that's the reason why I'm sharing this announcement.